Hello and welcome to the Providence College Podcast. My name is Chris Judge, class of '05, and producer of the PC Podcast. In celebration of the first week of spring training games, we wanted to reshare an interview Matt Chittum had October of last year with Sean Walsh, class of '03, Assistant Director of Client Services for the Boston Red Sox. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Providence College Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Providence College Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Chittum, and I'm joined, as always, by PC producer and videographer Chris Judge, class of '05. Here at the Providence College Podcast, it's our job to bring you interesting stories from inside the Friar family. And today we are joined by the Assistant Director of Client Services for the Boston Red Sox in 2003 PC grad, Sean Walsh. Sean, thank you for coming on the pod.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. I know that this is a pretty slow time of year for you guys, so we do appreciate.
It's the worst time of year for us, that's for sure.
just so our listeners know, we're recording this on Wednesday, October 4th, and tomorrow is the first day of the playoffs for the Red Sox. So you must be. I can't imagine what it's like over there in your office.
It's a little busy for sure, but it's a good busy, as we like to refer to it. Obviously there are a bunch of teams now that are kind of packing everything up and already looking forward to the 2018 season. So we're lucky that we're sitting here and having conversations about playing Houston and getting ready for Houston. And again, not knowing how long it's going to go. It could end as early as it did last year in 3 games. We hope not. We hope it ends in a deep October, but we're looking forward to it one way or the other.
Yeah, I can imagine that everyone's optimistic. And I mean, before we even got started, you guaranteed that you guys were going to win the World Series. So I really appreciate that.
That is the hope every year. It doesn't always turn out that way, but I've been lucky enough to be here for 3 different World Series championships. So I know exactly how it feels to win, and I know how it feels to lose in the first round in 3 games. So I've run the gauntlet of emotions that you can have as a worker for a professional sports team.
Right, and I did, just to clarify, obviously I'm joking around. Sean did not guarantee any wins, never mind the World Series championship. I don't want to get you in trouble with your bosses.
I don't have that much control over the team. I wish I did, but I don't have that much say. I wish I did, but luckily I control the premium seating. I know everyone there will have a good time at the games.
Right, so first of all, you've been with the Red Sox since you graduated in '03. So, first of all, what is that like to be at an organization for that long? And just to put that in perspective, any career stat that you see, they show that people usually change jobs, especially people in their 20s, every 18 to 24 or 36 months. Obviously, you've kind of rebelled against that in a way, not necessarily intentionally.
I'm fighting it the best I can, yes.
but you're making it happen over there. So, what goes into your thought process in terms of staying at a job for that long, considering that some of your peers are kind of doing the opposite?
Sure. I always joke with people that growing up, I always thought I would play left field for the Boston Red Sox. And my favorite player growing up was Mike Greenwell, who was a left fielder for us, a great left fielder. And we've had a history of great left fielders. I thought I was next in line. I learned very quickly in high school that I couldn't hit a curveball nor catch up to anything with speed on a fastball. So that was not going to happen for me. So the way I look at this is my job is really the next best step I could take to still be part of a baseball organization. And I got very lucky when I got the position, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit. But I've seen progress in my elevation within the company, and what we've done has always excited me. And we're a growing company, and we'll talk about a little bit about we're not just a baseball team as well. We do a lot of different other things at Fenway that really keep me on my toes. I wear a lot of different hats, which is really good. Because baseball games, and we have enough of them, being 81, but we do a lot of different things here, and it's a lot of fun. So really, the challenge in the fact that we keep growing as a company, and there's also the sports side of it too. Is like I said, I was an athlete in high school, and that competitive part. As much as I don't play on the field, this is as close as I'm going to get to be part of a winning situation, and that really carries for me a little bit as well.
So you were a marketing major here at PC, and that's a big major for us.
Yeah.
And when you went into that program, or when you came into Providence College generally, did you have an idea that you'd be potentially entering the sports world professionally?
It's if you'd asked me back when I was, in high school and going into college, ask what's the perfect situation, it would have been something like this. I didn't just pigeonhole myself into that, although I was pretty selective. I went in undeclared, but I knew it was going to be something in business. I just wasn't quite sure where it was going to go, the finance, accounting, marketing. I liked it all, and I just really knew I liked the business side of it, but I gave myself a little time to kind of figure out. And I think I ended up declaring after my freshman year that I was going to do marketing, because that just seemed to be the area that looking at the classes that Providence offered and really what my likes and dislikes were, marketing seemed to be the path I wanted to go down, at least explore to start my career.
And you did some internships, and expand on this if it isn't a full list, at Mix 98.5 in Boston, as well as 92 Pro FM and The Score here in Rhode Island. So did those internships kind of jumpstart your idea of kind of getting into the sports world professionally, or was that just kind of like a step along the path?
For me, it was just really, going into my junior year, I just sat there and I said, hey, I've got to get something here. Actually, going into my senior year, I said, I've got to get something going here. And I hadn't really done much. I'd done a lot on school. I was with the board of programmers, so I had a hand with everything that they do there. But I didn't have any office-like experience. So I said, I've got to be able to figure it out. So I ended up applying for a position with Mix 98.5, as that's what it was back then. It's now 104.1 in Boston. And that was during my fall semester. And, I was willing to make the commute from Providence all the way up to Boston 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a week, because I really liked what the opportunity was to be in their marketing department and kind of work hand in hand with a lot of the programs that they had going on there. And it ended up being a great experience. I never minded a 2-hour commute back and forth. Because some of the experiences I had there were incredible. I walked in my second day on the job, we ended up having Chris Martin from Coldplay came in to do an acoustic show right in the office. And this was, Coldplay right now is one of the biggest bands in the world. But back then, their second album had just been released that week, and they were just about to really take that next step. So it was pretty cool to have go in and work with Chris a little bit on an acoustic set and kind of handle that side of it. So I had a lot of really cool experiences doing that.
In your first job out, you were ticket office sales and customer service associate at the Boston Red Sox. So going from the marketing side and a little bit of events, a little bit of promotion with some of these internships and marketing as well within your major, then you get into the office sales type atmosphere. What was that like? What exactly does that job entail? Because I know for a lot of people, their first job out, you're not, even if you land with your ideal organization, the ideal job isn't going to be there when you're 22 necessarily.
Sure, yeah. And that's exactly what it was for me at that point. And then I got that job. So I graduated in May, and I didn't get the Red Sox position till November. So really at that point, it was, how do I get off my parents' couch and go get myself a job? I had been looking. I had some bites with a few things, a couple things that I got closed and didn't work out, a position that I turned down because I just didn't really feel comfortable in it. But, we're 6 months past my graduation, and I'm sitting there, and my parents are sitting there going, hey, you got to kind of get going. So the Red Sox opportunity presented itself as it was pitched to me. It was a position to come in and sell a mini season ticket plan that they were just introducing. And, it could be for a month, maybe 2 months. There was no guarantee beyond that. But like I said, I wasn't doing anything at the time, and it was the Boston Red Sox. And I said, worst case scenario that happens here is I get in, I try this out, and I at least get some experience here, and it might be my next stepping stone for where I go, even if it's not with the Red Sox. So I took the chance. I jumped into it, and 14 years later, they still haven't kicked me out of here yet.
And what does it entail to do 2 months worth of a temporary job selling tickets? Like, what, from a day-to-day perspective or hour-to-hour perspective, what does that look like?
Sure, yeah. What we were doing then is the Red Sox at the time, they had introduced a plan, and we didn't necessarily have the greatest greatest plan in terms of getting the season tickets sold. They had to bring some people in, and they had revamped the ticket office at that time. So we were really, responding to people calling and that had called, that had left voicemails, calling them back, setting them up with the season ticket plans, getting them all set up in their seats, which was, unique. And I've been to Fenway many, many times, but this is on a different level. You're now selling someone a specific seat, and what the great knowledge I thought I had of Fenway really wasn't necessarily as great as I thought, because I didn't know exactly where this section was and this row was and how the view is from here and there. So there was a lot of learning for me, learning a park that I already thought I was familiar with, learning sales terminology, that's the way the Red Sox speak on things, and so there was a lot to do as well, trying to make sure that we're continually going and continually selling and trying to sell this plan out as quickly as we possibly can.
Now, did you have any sales background before this position?
I not really. No, I always tell people, I think marketing, there's always a sales side to it. And really, when you're doing interviews and you're working yourself through your career, you're always kind of selling yourself. So that's really the sales knowledge I had, was just trying to sell myself, selling some of the programs we did. I worked with a couple of the concerts that we had at Providence, so I did some minor sales stuff there. But not like some people that focus in on it right away. It was really new to me. It was a unique experience and not something I sit there and say, hey, I love the sales process, but I understand how it works and I understand how vital it is to our industry and how how much it's needed. I mean, when you deal with the Red Sox, we're a baseball team, but really the number one thing we deal with is ticket sales, and that's the lifeblood of our team in many respects. So it really got me in on the ground level of how an organization in the sport industry really works.
So I'm assuming you did a good job because they kept you around. But were there any?
I think so.
But were there any low points or any kind of sales calls you were on that went a little sideways for you?
You hear all the stories, and as my sales job, it transitioned a little bit more into a customer service end of things. You hear a lot of different stories about people and how, they said they called in and they talked to someone and they were given misinformation, or as, the season goes along. And if anyone is familiar with Fenway Park, we have some unique seats at Fenway Park with some of the poles and the obstructions that we have. And some of the people weren't necessarily happy once the season started with their location. And that's a difficult conversation to have. I think, my 2 years experience in the ticket office, one of the big things I picked up is how to handle those difficult conversations. Which is really, it's a unique skill, and it's a very difficult skill because not a lot of people, are put in front of a lot of different conversations or necessarily are very good at it. But I developed a thick skin very quickly on some of the calls that we had, and really kind of diving into, okay, what's the root issue here? How do we go about fixing this? Working with the Red Sox philosophy of trying to make sure that the fan is happy, because in the end, they are a number one concern that we have. I learned a lot about that. And there was definitely some unique phone calls and situations that you kind of jump out at you and you go, wow, I didn't even think about that when I was selling it, or I can see why this person might have an issue with the seats they have.
So what percentage of the calls that you got either then or even now, you're assistant director of client services, so it's a much different job, but percentage of kind of happy fans who are excited to, hey, this is my favorite team, I'm so excited to get this going, versus the disappointed fan who's maybe equally passionate, but the call has a negative tone to it?
Sure, and that definitely transitions as I move from the ticket office to the premium seating side of things. And the ticket office, a lot of it was, it was people that were, if they were calling you, it was because they had an issue, and they happen, and you try to limit them the best that you can throughout the season, but they're going to happen, and you kind of deal with that. So it was much higher on that end. Now, when I deal with it, I'm lucky in that it really was a transition, and a lot of what I do is be able to say yes to people. And try to make things happy for it. And I've also been doing, particularly with the set of clients that I've had, some of these clients now I've had for 12 years. I've built great relationships with these people. So when the situations arise, and I'm telling them, oh, no, we can't do this, or this isn't going to be possible, because I've been dealing with them for so long, they understand that I've done everything I possibly can to see if it is possible, and that, I've have their best interests out and when I'm looking for it. And that's really a key is the relationships I've been able to establish with people make those difficult conversations. I'll give you a perfect example is when before one of the last seasons, before the 2016 season, we had to extend our netting at Fenway Park. And for the people that it affected directly right in the first and second row, those were my clients. And those are phone calls I had to make, which some people, they were totally fine with it. Others were upset, that we were putting a netting in. And because I had a relationship built with these people, the conversation was much easier than some random person just calling them up saying, hey, guess what? We're putting a net in front of your seats. I was able to talk to them. They were able to vent to me, and I'm not going to take offense to it because I know, they're just venting at this point. And that's, a really good thing is to know that a client can sit there and tell you what they really think, and you're not going to take offense to it, and they know you're not going to take offense to it, because that's how you're really going to, in the end, figure out how to solve it for the person. So, the 12 years experience just in this department and 14 overall, I've been able to build those relationships and have when those difficult conversations come up, it's usually with someone that I have a great background with, and it makes those conversations a lot easier than it would be just randomly calling someone up.
Now, why is it necessary, just kind of going right back to the beginning, why is it necessary to have client service professionals working with those individuals in those seats? So why is it in the best interest of the Red Sox to actually have this position?
Yeah, so we were a little unique. A lot of teams now, they have the setup that we have, but we were in a unique situation when I started in that. And this is a great problem to have, is that, we didn't necessarily need a sales department per se like other teams did. This is the peak of the Red Sox. I mean, that 03, 4, 5, all the way through 9, 10, 11, where the Red Sox, we were winning, we were huge, everything was popular, and we're pretty much back at that level now. But we didn't necessarily, we could put tickets on sale and they would sell. Season tickets would open up and they would be gone in 2 seconds. So what we really did when we revamped the premium seating at Fenway Park, we sat there and said, okay, hey, these seats are going to more or less sell themselves. We don't necessarily need to focus on the sales side of it. But what we really need to make sure is that we're keeping these people happy. And so we put all our budget, everything that we could do in our personnel into the service side of it. And that means being there for them 24/7 for everything they need, whatever, whenever it regards their tickets or going to the game or special events that they have. That's my department's job, is to make sure that these people are happy. A lot of the seats that we have are contractually committed. And the end goal for us is when their contract comes back up, we want them to say yes again, that they're signing back up with us. So, and we're lucky again that we've got an extended period because it is a contract to try to work with them and build those relationships to make sure that they want to stay. But that in the end is our goal. And we're the service side of it. And we're sitting there and we're trying to make these people happy and make sure, especially now, a lot of people we hear, they want to make sure they see value in the tickets that they have, value in the amount of money they're spending, value in the amount of time that they're spending with us. And so that's a key word for us is value, and making sure that they see the value of the Red Sox tickets that we know exist. And we want to make sure they see that as well.
And just the in-game experience has changed so much in the past 5 years, not just in baseball, but in basically any professional league.
Everyone's got cell phones. Everyone's got texting during the game, and trying to do apps and everything like that. It's dramatically changed.
Right. So for you, not just you personally, but for your organization, how do you make sure that you say you want to make sure you provide value to the people who are occupying those seats? How does the change in technology affect the kind of value you're able to provide?
Sure. Yeah. It's always happening, and it's probably one of the issues that we have to stay on top of the most is that making sure that, and we're an old ballpark, so that's probably one great place to start is we're a very old ballpark. And that's a great thing to have, and people love the fact that they come to Fenway, and it's number one tourist attraction around here. But it provides some unique situations where some of the technology that you might sit there, that you go to a new ballpark and you see, we necessarily can't or aren't able to incorporate in the ballpark that we have here. So you got to find that balance of things, is being able to make sure that we're blending in what Fenway truly is and why people actually come, but giving everyone the technology advances when they do come and when we can implement them. And that's a tough balance to find, And people want to sit there and they want to be able to watch the games on the TV, or they want to be able to watch other games on their TV and get up to the minute stats and things like that. And, we do a lot of work with MLB BAM, who's the advanced media for all of Major League Baseball. And they do an incredible job of trying to advance that across all of baseball and working with the teams to make sure that everyone's, technology up to par. And we also do a lot of work with talking to different teams and sitting there going, hey, what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing? It's not, I think sometimes people think, on the field, obviously there's a competition and you're trying to beat the other team. But, when we're dealing with other Major League Baseball teams, we want to know what they're doing and what's working for them. Because in the end, as a baseball organization, as Major League Baseball, it works much better when everyone's at their peak. And it works. That's just how our collective bargaining agreement set up and how everything works. So, where I'm calling up the Oakland A's, and if I hear something that the San Francisco Giants are doing, I want to know right away, like, hey, I just heard about this. What are you guys doing with that? So that's another way that we're keeping up, is we're just talking amongst the teams, trying to figure out, hey, what's everyone doing and why does this work versus that not working, and go from there.
And in your job, in terms of the relationship management aspect of the profession, that's not a whole lot different than a lot of people working in various other jobs in a lot of different industries who, in a service-based economy, you're going to see a lot of that. So for you, what are some of the things that you try to emphasize with your team, and how much of your communications with these individuals, not your team, but the people who are going to the games and the clients you're working with, how much of that is proactive communication on your part versus reactive, like they're reaching out to you, good, bad, or neutral?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good mix for what we do. And I think the biggest thing, or one thing that really separates us from other industries that do a client service type of atmosphere, is that, the one thing my department can't have any control over is how the team performs on the field. And I would love to have that control. I wish I did, but I don't. And that's what a lot of our people put value into. If the team is losing every single day and, finishing in last place after last place, it's difficult for them to justify, because a lot of people put so much value into the on-field performance. So really, when I talk to my staff, I sit there and say the biggest thing we can do is try to chip away at that thought process. And that, I want someone to come to me or send me an email afterwards and say, hey, I went to the game and we don't want to hear that the Red Sox lost, but they might say Red Sox got blown out 9-1, but you know what? I had an incredible pregame tour on the field. I got an autograph, had an absolute amazing dinner up in the Dell EMC Club. My seats were incredible. I caught a foul ball and I left the game. And by the end of it, they don't necessarily even care that the team won or lost, because everything else that we have control over was top notch. And that's really where we push it. And we're always going to know that the team performance is going to have some percentage on the value and how they look at things at the end. But we're really there. Can we chip away at that and really say, but the experience is why I'm going here? And that's really, when I talk to my staff, that's really the number one thing I constantly push, is make sure the experience is top notch, and make sure that, you might be doing something for the 10th time in a 10-game homestand, but for that person you're dealing with, that might be the only time they come to Fenway Park. So you got to be right on every time you do it.
That's a great point. And I think even expanding on that, I can imagine in an office like yours. Now, this is just me projecting, so please tell me if I'm wrong. I'm imagining a whole host of men and women who someday want to be the next Theo Epstein, Ben Cherington, Dave Dombrowski, the GM of the Boston Red Sox. And, they might have this goal in mind, the sports goal they've had, in their head for decades. And yet they have this current role that might not be anywhere near the goal role. And being able to focus on the day-to-day kind of micro tasks that are involved in that at the same time. So do you find that? Like, what's the office culture like in that regard?
Yeah, it's difficult in that regard, in that we work a lot, and there's no way around it. We have 81 baseball games, and the baseball games are during the summer when a lot of people are cutting back maybe a little bit and taking vacations. On top of 81 games, we typically have anywhere from 8 to 12 concerts, special events. Then we have season ticket holder events that we add in there. There's a lot. We're probably working with just that. My department, and there's much more that the park actually does, but just talking about my department, we're dealing with 100 plus different events that we've got to, kind of be encompassed with, along with your daily 9 to 5, Monday through Friday job that you have there. And so the atmosphere and the culture of ours is probably a little different than most organizations, in that we really have to keep it loose, because there is no way you can grind, and you hear about the baseball grind and teams in July and August starting to get tired. That transitions over to the front office as well. You hit July, you hit August, you've worked so much already, and you sit there and you're getting tired. And that's a normal thing, and we recognize that, and we try to make sure that we're taking care of our staff and giving them the breaks when it's needed. But our culture is probably a little bit looser than most organizations, in that we kind of have to be that way, because if you just sat there and pedal to the metal all day long, by May or June, you're going to sit there and say, I can't do this anymore. So you really got to keep it loose and figure out ways to do it. We're very flexible. My start time, I don't necessarily have a 9 a.m. start time. I have between, I'm usually in earlier around 9 o'clock, but some people roll in 9:30, 9:45, because guess what? The game last night went 15 innings, and we've done plenty of those this year. So to sit there and tell someone that they've been at the park till 1:30 in the morning and they got to be back in at 9, unless they absolutely have to, don't. Take the morning, get relaxed, hit the reset button a little bit, and get back in. Because the worst thing that can happen, that person's not going to help me out later tonight if they got home at 2:30, and they're trying to be in here for 9 in the morning. It's just not going to help me out at night. So I'd rather have you reset and kind of come in maybe a little later and, be ready to go for that night. Because, again, like we talked about, is that night's going to be really important for whoever's coming to the game.
That's a great point. And I think anyone who either has worked in sports or knows a friend or a family member who works in sports can testify to the crazy hours, not just on a weekday perspective, but on the weekends as well. I'm looking at my.
It's amazing what we work.
I'm looking at my producer, Chris Judge here. He's the man, I swear, works 80 hours a week between his job and helping out athletics in previous years and things like that. I think that's one thing that gets lost in the idea of working in sports is that people say, hey, it's wonderful. I love baseball. I love basketball. I love football. Wouldn't it be great to work in that industry? And maybe it is, but it has its challenges at the same time.
But there are times that you're going to give things up, and you're going to sit there, and all your friends are maybe going down to the Cape for a weekend, or your family is, and guess what? You've got 3 games against the Yankees. You're not going to be able to get down there. And I have, even myself, someone that's been here that's used to it, there are moments every season where I have that, and I think everyone in the organization goes through that. But you know what? There are so many other moments that make up for that no one else is really going to get to experience on the level. I'll give you 2 examples, and one is pretty obvious, is I've been here for 3 World Series championships. In the first one in St. Louis, 2004, I was on the field after the game. Last one we won, I had my wife on the field, and I've got 2 kids, and I can't wait to hopefully at one point be able to bring my kids on the field after World Series to celebrate. And then last year we had, one of the concerts, we had Pearl Jam, and Pearl Jam is by far my favorite band. And to have them be here, and we ended up getting set up with their sound guy who brought me on stage before we opened up the park. And no one is going to get to experience a moment like that at different jobs. It's really, that's part of the good part of my job, is that I have moments like that. So for all those few times where I sit there and I say, oh, God, game 12 of 12 here, it's really tiring. I wouldn't want to be here. I've got so many other moments where I sit there and go, but you know what? I get to do all these other things, and that's the incredible part of my job.
And at the same time, as you just mentioned, you have a wife and a young family. So how hard is that for you from a work-life balance perspective, especially during the season?
It's been unique, and you sit there, and I've always kind of looked at it different parts of my career. And when I started, I was just happy to have a job, and I was happy that even though I really didn't know how long this job was going to happen, that I had one, and we'll just see how it goes. And you're young, and you can work the late hours and still go out and have a good time, and that doesn't matter. And then you kind of sit there, and at a certain point, you got to sit there and go, okay, here's what my job could be. Here's the hours. Here's the pay. Here's what it's going to be. Are you okay with that? And then so I've had that conversation. I've probably had that conversation with myself maybe, 3 times where I sat there and said, are you okay with this? And then I had my wife, and, and we got married, and I said, okay, are you okay with that? And then I have 2 kids. I have almost 3 and a 7-week-old. And I sit there and I say, am I okay with this? Am my schedule? Is this going to be okay for my family? Is this going to be able to provide for my family? So you definitely have checkpoints where you have to sit there and say to yourself, does this work for you? And that should be with any job, is you have to sit there and you're going to say, does this work for you? And does this, when you get a family, does this work for your family? Up to this point, I've always said yes. When I sit there and say everything I do, and then my family's really into baseball, and my son loves Wally, so he's able to come to the park and see Wally. Yes, it still works for me. But there might be a time where I come and I say, you know what? It's not working anymore. It doesn't work for my family. It doesn't work for me personally. I have to kind of consider what my options are. But, so far I've always said with a resounding yes, this still works for me.
Well, that's good to hear. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, especially people who are, have a young family where the time demands with young kids is tough, because especially if, you want to be fair to your spouse and you want to be fair to your kids, and at the same time, you have either professional goals or professional obligations that are also pulling on you. So I can see how that could be a challenge.
And I think people are sometimes afraid to have that conversation, or afraid that the answer might be, I need to look at other options. And I think that's healthy to have that conversation. And it's a good thing to sit there and then make that conversation and have it with your family. Or if it's just you, have that conversation with yourself. And then don't be afraid if the answer is, I have to move on. Because that's an honest answer. And the biggest problem you can do is try to sit there and lie to yourself and say, no, everything's fine. And now you're 3-4 years down the road from when you really should have made that change. And you're just putting yourself more behind the 8 ball than you should have. So having that conversation in any industry is a healthy thing to do.
And not necessarily work-life balance related, but what's some of the best career advice you've ever gotten?
So some of the best career advice, I really think, I start back and I look back at the work ethic that my dad, and this wasn't really advice where he gave me words or anything like that, and I kind of sit there and then I remember how long my dad used to work and the hours he used to do. And as a young kid, I would be bummed because my dad wasn't necessarily home. And it's funny now because I see that with me, and probably my son thinking the same exact thing is, why doesn't daddy come home at the same time that, my wife does? But really, that's kind of sitting there, and that was the work ethic that was installed with me. It's to just kind of sit there, and then this is what it takes to do the job, and so to make sure you're doing that. And that's not sitting there. And, I think the worst thing some people do, and this was actually some advice that someone gave me one time, it said, don't just be here to be here. And sometimes I see people in the office and they're literally not doing anything, but they just want to make sure they're in the office so that people can see them. It's like, don't do that. We spend enough time here at the park. You don't have to do that. Be here if you've got stuff to do, but if you don't, take that time and get out of here, because there are going to be times where you're going to want to get out and you wish you could get out and you're not going to be able to. So, don't just necessarily sit in an office just so people see you, because people are going to be able to see right through that, first off. And two, it's not going to be healthy for yourself. So really just be here when you need to be here and make the most of that time.
All right. And then conversely, what advice would you give, or do you give, to people who are entering basically the bottom level job at the Red Sox or any other, kind of passion industry that they have? It's maybe like the lowest rung on the ladder. It might not even be a job they're excited about, but it's an organization they're excited about. What kind of advice do you give, or insight can you provide for someone who's entering that sort of job and hoping for the best, but not quite sure how it's going to play out?
Yeah, it's funny. I've actually did after I did the Instagram stuff for Providence last week. I've had a lot of LinkedIn requests and things pop up, and people from PC, which is fantastic, reaching out to me asking about my experiences and basically asking that same question. And really, again, the answer to that question usually starts with yourself and knowing yourself and what you want to do. There's a lot of things that factor into it, a financial thing. Can you take it? I tell people, you want to get into the sports industry? It's difficult. It is, I started off as a part-time person, and I was a part-time person for 3 years before I became a full-time person. And the pay is not great to start out. And I knew that going in, so I was prepared for that. But you get a lot of friends that They graduate with you. They go to different corporations. They've got things lined up. It's a full-time position. They're making more money. And you kind of sit there and you question yourself whether this is worth it. So you really you kind of have to answer the question of, is this a passion? Do you really enjoy this? Is this something you want to go down, the path you want to go down, and you're okay with it, with what else might come with it, low pay, long hours, things like that. And so, you gotta find that balance for yourself of what you're okay with versus what your passion is. And there's a lot of things I'm passionate about, but I would never want to work in that industry. But, I was lucky that I found something that I was passionate about, but I sat there and I said, the money side, obviously, yes, I would like to make more money than I am. I think everyone says that. But to start off with, I'm really just happy that I got in an industry that I think I'm really going to be good at, and that I'll be able to grow my career in. And so you got to have those conversations with yourself to find that balance between your passion and what you can actually, when you graduate college, what you actually can do, and not setting yourself too far behind.
That's a good point. And I think especially for New Englanders, just like our era, I graduated in college in 2003, just like you did. And I think anyone our era, going back 15 years ago, looks at it and says, hey, Theo Epstein was GM of the Red Sox by age 30. Here I am. Yeah. I'm 28. What am I doing? Or I'm 32. I'm behind the eight ball.
Not many people do it as well as Theo did. He's already writing his Hall of Fame speech somewhere in Chicago, I think.
Right. And it can be hard, especially like you mentioned before. Yeah. You did the Instagram takeover for PC, and a lot of people like that. But it can be hard not to compare yourself to those people who are, just kind of really accelerating the career curve that most people would go through.
And it's difficult not to compare yourself. I think everyone does that. That's the competitive nature that a lot of people have in there. But you really got to do the best that you can. Try to eliminate that and sit back and go, yeah, that's great for that person. But that's not necessarily who I am or what my skill set would do. So I got to figure out what my skill set can do, figure out how I get myself in with the skill set I have, and go from there and create your own. Be your own Theo Epstein. It doesn't have to be Theo Epstein of the Boston Red Sox, Chicago Cubs. Be the Theo Epstein of a different industry, of the finance industry or the healthcare industry. Try to be that. You want to sit there and Theo's a great person to look at and say, hey, here's a kid that pushed himself, that did everything he could, knew what he wanted to do, and it really guided his career to do that. And he was able to succeed at a very young age. But, not everyone's going to do it that quickly. Not everyone's going to catch the breaks that he did. And some of his breaks were, just happened to be timing, and other things happened to be because of all the work he put into it. But really, just figure out what can make you become that type of person, and just go for it if you can.
That's great. Well, Sean, I know you're a busy guy. Playoffs start tomorrow. You're playing Red Sox play Houston.
2 in Houston.
There you go. So good luck with everything. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, guys.
And go Sox.
Thank you very much, guys. It was a pleasure.